She walked in with that kind of silence that already said too much. Rachel hadn't visited in over 6 months, and when she finally did, it wasn't with warmth. It was with obligation. Her hug was quick, stiff, like she was clocking in. I had set the table, made her favorite, beef stew, the one with the rosemary rolls she used to tear apart with her little hands. Back then, she'd call me the best cooker in the world. Tonight, she barely touched her plate. Before we dive into this, drop a comment on where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. You're in for a wild ride. We sat. She scrolled. I tried to make small talk. Asked about her work, her new place, that man she was seeing. Michael, was it? She answered in clipped phrases. No details. No stories. Just the facts, like reading from a report. And then she put her phone down and looked straight at me. The same eyes that used to light up when I picked her up from school. But this time, they didn't sparkle. They judged. Dad, you're too much. That's how she started. No let-in, no softening blow. Just those 3 words. I blinked. What do you mean? You overwhelm people. You get emotional over everything. You talk too much. You always want to give your opinion, even when no one's asking for it. It's a lot. I sat there, trying to hold the moment together, like if I just kept breathing slow enough, I could rewind time, make her smile again, make her see me. Instead, I reached for my napkin, not to wipe my mouth, but to keep my hands busy, because they were shaking. Rach, I didn't mean to overwhelm you. I just care. That's all I've ever done. She sighed like she'd heard it all before. I know you think you're helping, but sometimes I feel like I have to manage you. It's exhausting. It landed like a slap. I had spent years trying to be the strong one, the calm one, the provider. After her mom passed, I never let her see me fall apart, not once. I kept the lights on, paid for college, drove 4 hours just to fix a flat tire she didn't even thank me for. Now, I was a burden. She stayed another 10 minutes, said she had to meet Michael for dinner, left her plate mostly untouched, said goodbye with a pat on the back. A pat, not even a hug. The door clicked shut behind her, and I sat back down at the table. Her napkin was folded perfectly. Mine was crumpled like something ruined. I looked across at her empty seat, then at the bowl of stew gone cold, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a father. I felt like a guest overstaying his welcome. I kept showing up, not in big, dramatic ways, just the quiet kind that a father thinks might still matter. On her birthday, I mailed a handwritten card and a necklace I thought she'd like. It wasn't expensive, but it had a tiny engraved compass. A reminder, I wrote, that she'd always find her way, and maybe find her way back, too. No reply. Thanksgiving came. I roasted a turkey anyway, made a little plate just for her in case she dropped by. I texted her that morning, said the door was open, the food was hot, and I'd love to see her if she had time. She heart-reacted the message. No words. No visit. Christmas? I bought her a scarf. Warm cashmere, navy blue, her favorite in high school. Wrapped it up with care. Drove across town and left it at her apartment door because she said they'd be out of town. When I came back a week later, it was still sitting there in the hallway, unopened. I picked it up, brought it home. Didn't even bother unwrapping it. Just tossed it in the back of the closet like some kind of confession I didn't want to read. Still, I made excuses. Maybe she was just busy. Maybe Michael didn't like visitors. Maybe she was trying to build a life of her own, and I needed to let go a little. But letting go felt too close to giving up. So I kept texting. Little things. Thinking of you. Hope your Monday's better than mine. I sent her photos of our old dog, Max, sleeping on the couch like a king. Sent her a video once of me trying to bake her favorite lemon cake and failing miserably. Thought she'd laugh. She didn't reply. I told myself this was just a phase, that all daughters grow distant for a while, that she'd circle back, the way people always do when they realize where home truly is. I told myself these things because the alternative was too painful to admit. Maybe I wasn't home to her anymore. I'd sit with my phone, rereading the messages I'd sent, looking for clues. Was I too needy? Too emotional? Should I have just played it cooler? Maybe I was smothering her with all my good intentions. Still, I waited. For a call. For a knock on the door. For any kind of breadcrumb that might lead me back into her life. Because love, I thought, was enough. It had to be. I wasn't supposed to be there that night. The dinner wasn't for me. It was one of those accidental invitations, where someone forgets to filter the group text. She'd sent it to a handful of old friends, maybe a few coworkers, and somehow my number slipped in. I showed up with a bottle of red wine and the best shirt I owned, knocked on her door with this stupid hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd smile when she saw me. That she'd say, "I'm glad you came, Dad." She didn't. She opened the door, surprised. Her eyes widened, but not in the good way. "Oh, I didn't realize you got the invite." I held up the wine, tried to play it cool. "Thought I'd swing by. Big night, huh?" And then he appeared. Michael. Tailored blazer, perfect teeth, the kind of man who probably sends thank you emails with bullet points. He extended his hand like I was a client, not a father. "Nice to finally meet you, sir." Sir. That one word made me feel like I belonged in a rocking chair on the porch, collecting dust. The dinner was fine. The food was too modern for my taste. Small portions, fancy names. I smiled through it, tried to make conversation, asked Michael about his work, something in financial analytics. He spoke in polished phrases that said everything and nothing at once. And Rachel, she laughed at his dry jokes, touched his arm every time she agreed with him, looked at him like he was a promise. And when I spoke, she barely reacted. At one point I started telling a story from her childhood, the time she tried to adopt a stray duck and hid it in her closet for 3 days. Midway through, Michael cut in with some quip about misplaced empathy. Everyone chuckled. Rachel laughed, too. She didn't even look at me. I realized, sitting at that table, that I was no longer the person she turned to for wisdom or comfort. That role had been recast, and the man sitting across from me wore it like it was tailored for him. After dinner, she walked me to the door, said she'd call me soon. I knew she wouldn't. As I walked to my car, the night felt too quiet. Even the wind didn't want to speak. I looked up at her apartment, lights glowing warm from the inside. It used to be my job to keep the lights on for her. Now someone else had taken that torch, and I was just a shadow fading into the parking lot. It had been raining all morning, one of those slow, steady drizzles that soaked through everything and made the world feel heavier than it should. I stood outside her apartment building, holding a paper bag filled with groceries, things I knew she liked, blueberries, herbal tea, the pasta brand her mother used to buy. Tucked under my arm was a framed photo I'd found while cleaning out the hallway closet. Rachel, age 6, missing both front teeth, grinning up at me from a makeshift cardboard spaceship we built together. I thought she'd like it. I thought maybe it would remind her of a time before everything felt so fractured. I knocked, smiling like a fool. It took her a minute to answer. When the door finally creaked open, she peeked out with the kind of expression people reserve for unexpected guests or unwanted salesmen. She wasn't angry, just tired. "Dad," she said flatly. "Hey," I replied, lifting the bag. "Brought you a few things, and, something I found you might like." I gently tapped the corner of the frame poking out from under my coat. She didn't even glance at it, just looked down the hallway, then back at me. "You really don't get boundaries, do you? My smile faltered. I just thought I'd surprise you. You mentioned last week you'd been too busy to shop, so. That wasn't an invitation, she said, arms crossed now. I was venting, not asking for a visit. I tried to laugh it off. I wasn't trying to barge in, just thought you could use a little help. Her sigh was long, practiced. Michael's working from home. He has calls all afternoon. I can't have unplanned drop-ins, Dad. It's disruptive. Disruptive. That word sank into my chest like a cold coin. She took the grocery bag from my hands, not gently, and added, "I'll text you later, okay?" And then she reached for the door. "Wait," I said, holding out the photo frame. "Just here." She took it reluctantly, barely looked at it. "Thanks." Then the door clicked shut. I stood there for a moment, alone in the hallway, dripping, listening to the faint sounds of muffled conversation and laughter behind her door. None of it meant for me. The elevator ride down was silent. My reflection in the mirror looked older than I remembered. Damp. Small. I had come with love in my arms. She saw it as a mess on her doorstep. And somehow, I was the one who left feeling like an intruder in my own daughter's life. The house was too quiet for a holiday. I'd prepped the turkey like I always did, stuffed it with apples, thyme, a little rosemary. Rachel used to love the way the whole place smelled when it came out of the oven, said it made the house feel alive. But this year, she didn't call. No text. No "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad." I kept checking my phone, convincing myself maybe the signal was off, maybe the message was late, maybe she was just busy helping cook at Michael's place. Then I opened my laptop. I don't know why I did it. Curiosity, maybe, or habit. And there it was. A photo posted just an hour earlier. Rachel standing beside Michael's mother in a modern white kitchen, both of them laughing, holding matching wine glasses. Another shot of Michael carving a turkey, Rachel's arm draped around him. A third one, everyone sitting at a long dining table, full plates, full smiles, full hearts. Except for mine. I stared at the screen while the turkey cooled on the counter behind me. I had set the table for two, just in case. Lit a candle, folded the napkins. Her seat was empty, like a placeholder in a life she'd already outgrown. I didn't cry. Not right away. I just stood there, frozen, with the kind of silence that presses down on your bones. She had a new family now, one that didn't include me. And it wasn't that she forgot. No, she chose. That was the part that stung, because love doesn't disappear overnight. It gets replaced. And on a day meant for gratitude and gathering, I was left with leftovers and a chair no one would sit in. It had been nearly 3 months since Thanksgiving. No calls, no messages, just silence where a daughter's voice used to be. I stared at my phone that afternoon, thumb hovering over her name in my contacts. I'd done this dance before, opened the screen, hovered, then backed out like a coward. But something in me cracked. I needed to hear her voice, even if just for a moment. She answered on the third ring. "Hello?" Her voice was flat, neutral, no surprise, no joy. "Hey, Rach," I said, trying to sound lighter than I felt. "It's me." Pause. "I know," she replied. I just wanted to hear your voice. I've missed you." Another pause, this one heavier. "Dad," she began, and I heard the warning in her tone already. "We've talked about this." "I don't want to argue," I said quickly. I've been thinking about you, about the holidays, about everything. I'm trying to understand what I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," she said, her voice clipped. "You're just exhausting." That one word, exhausting, sank into me like a knife. I tried to swallow, but my throat felt too tight. "I'm not trying to overwhelm you," I said, quieter now. "I'm trying to love you." "And that's the problem," she snapped. You think loving someone means smothering them. Every conversation turns into some emotional monologue. Everything always comes back to you. Your feelings, your memories, your loneliness. I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. I didn't know it made you feel that way. Well, it does, she said, her voice cold. It always has. You're too intense, Dad. You make everything about you. Silence followed. Long, stretching silence. Okay, I said finally, almost a whisper. I hear you. I have to go, she added. Michael's calling. And just like that, she was gone. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling. No TV, no music. Just me, the ticking clock, and the echo of her voice circling my mind. Too intense. Too much. Too emotional. Always about me. I had spent years being her protector, her provider, her guide through every scraped knee and broken heart. Now I was a burden wrapped in love she didn't want. And maybe, just maybe, I didn't know how to be anything else. I was at the grocery store when I found out, just standing in line with a loaf of bread and a carton of milk, half listening to the hum of conversations around me, when my cousin Margaret called. I don't hear from her often, usually birthdays, the odd family funeral. Hey, she said, a little too chipper. Are you all set for the big day? I shifted the phone to my other ear. Big day? Rachel's wedding. Next Saturday, right? I assumed you were walking her down the aisle. I didn't respond. I couldn't. She kept talking, unaware. I just saw the venue listed online. Gorgeous spot. Coastal view, I think. Michael's parents are footing the bill, I heard. She must be over the moon. Still, I said nothing. Because right then, in the middle of aisle 4 between bags of flour and frozen vegetables, I felt the air leave my lungs. She hadn't told me. Not only was I not invited, I didn't even know it was happening. I mumbled something about having another call, hung up, and left the groceries behind. I drove home without turning on the radio. Just silence, the kind that screams. At home, I checked her social media. Nothing public, no mention of it. But buried deep in a tagged photo from Michael's sister was a bridal shower 2 weeks ago. Rachel smiling, champagne in hand, surrounded by people I didn't recognize. I wasn't just left out. I was removed, erased like a pencil mark on a page she was rewriting. I sat on the edge of the couch for what felt like hours, holding my phone in both hands, staring at her contact. Should I call? Ask her why? But I already knew. She didn't want me there. Not because I'd ruin it, but because I didn't belong anymore. This wasn't about space, or boundaries, or modern independence. This was betrayal, dressed in silence. When her mother passed, I promised her I'd walk her down that aisle one day. I practiced that walk in my mind more times than I could count. Her hand in mine, steady steps toward a new life. But someone else would do that now. Someone who hadn't held her during night terrors, who didn't teach her to ride a bike, who didn't learn how to braid hair because her mom wasn't there. Someone who was convenient, palatable, not too much. I looked around the house, at the photo of us from her high school graduation, at the coat she'd left behind last winter, at the chair at the table that used to be hers, and I realized something awful. I had raised a stranger. The garage always had this quiet smell of dust and engine oil. That day, it felt like a tomb. I'd gone out there to find an old wrench, but what I found instead were pieces of a life that no longer wanted me. Boxes. So many boxes. I knelt down and opened the one marked Rachel a School. Inside were crumpled drawings on faded paper. Stick figures with wild hair and huge eyes. One had us holding hands. Me with a cape, her with a crown. Me and Daddy. He's the strongest. Another note in shaky block letters. I love you, Daddy. I want to marry you when I grow up. I laughed when I read that. The kind of laugh that turns to salt in the back of your throat. I kept digging. Report cards I'd praised. Father's Day cards she made with macaroni glued in the shape of a heart, photos of birthday parties, toothless grins, and cake on her cheeks. Evidence, proof, that once I was everything. I sat back on the concrete floor, those memories scattered around me, and I felt it hit me all at once. She didn't want that man anymore, not the one who stayed up through the night when she had a fever. Not the man who worked overtime for ballet classes she quit after 2 weeks. Not the one who read her the same bedtime book for a year straight just because it made her giggle. She wanted the other version, the convenient one. The one who wired money, gave advice only when asked, kept his emotions tucked away like old socks in a drawer. Quiet, predictable, useful. I wasn't a father anymore. I was a transaction. And the worst part? I couldn't even blame her. Somewhere along the way, maybe I did start pouring too much into her. Maybe I leaned too hard when I should have let go. Maybe I tried to be both mother and father, and in doing so, became too much of neither. I sat there for hours. Just me, the dust, and the ghosts of crayon-colored memories. I used to believe love was unbreakable if it was real enough, if it was fierce enough. But now, I knew better. Love doesn't disappear with a bang. It leaves quietly. One missed call at a time, one empty chair, one wedding invitation that never arrives. And suddenly, all that's left is a man in a garage, holding a macaroni heart, wondering how he became so easy to forget. That night I didn't cry. I didn't pace the halls. I didn't reach for a drink or call anyone for comfort. I sat at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and made a decision. Not out of anger, not out of spite, just stillness. A stillness so deep it felt like truth. The first thing I did was open my will, the one where Rachel was listed as sole beneficiary, the house, the savings, the truck, everything I had spent a lifetime building, organizing, and preserving. I stared at her name for a long time. Just 5 letters. But they used to mean everything. Then, with 2 keystrokes and a breath that came out of me like wind through a broken window, I erased it. In her place, I added a local shelter, the one her mother used to volunteer at years ago. I remembered the way she'd come home, stories spilling out of her like water, about the kids who had no one, until someone showed up. I figured they could use the help more than someone who had made it clear they didn't need me. Next, I logged into the bank. Every month I'd been sending Rachel $500. Quiet support, no strings attached. Just a father being a father, even from a distance. I canceled the transfer, closed the auto draft. Then I pulled up the records from last year, the $10,000 I'd wired to help her and Michael with their condo down payment. I'd told her it was a gift, and I meant it at the time, but the condo was in Michael's name. She never even gave me the address, so I called the lawyer, asked what could be done, asked how much could be undone. The point wasn't revenge, it was clarity. If I was too much, then maybe nothing would feel like a relief to her. I wasn't going to fight anymore for a seat at a table where I'd become the punchline. I closed the laptop, looked around the quiet kitchen. The chair she used to sit in still had a scratch down the leg from when she was 5 and tried to cut her own hair. I didn't feel bitter, just finished. They say withdrawal is the silent scream of self-respect. That night, I finally listened, and in the space where love used to plead, there was only peace. It was almost a full month before the call came. I was out back trimming the hedges when the phone rang in my pocket. I saw her name on the screen, and for a brief second, I felt that old ache, hope, dressed up as anxiety. I answered. "You changed your will?" Her voice was sharp. No hello. No, how have you been? "Yes," I said, wiping, my hands on a rag. "I did." Silence, then a scoff. "Are you serious right now? You're punishing me? For what, having boundaries? For building my own life?" I let her rant. I didn't interrupt. She needed to hear herself. "You're being petty and cruel," she snapped. "You're not hurting me. You're just proving you're everything I said. You're overreacting. You're too much, Dad." That last part, she said it like it was fact, like it was a label I should wear and accept. I didn't flinch. "No," I said quietly, voice steady. "I'm just being exactly what you said I was. Too much." She went quiet. I could hear her breathing on the other end, sharp and shallow, like someone who'd missed a step going down the stairs. "I gave you everything I had," I continued, "and it still wasn't what you wanted. So now I'm giving you nothing. That's easier for both of us, isn't it?" "You're unbelievable," she spat. "You really think this makes you the bigger person?" "No," I replied. "It just makes me done." And then, without waiting for the next barb, I hung up. I stood there in the backyard, sun warming my back, phone buzzing in my hand as she tried to call again. I didn't answer, not out of anger, but out of peace. For once I wasn't chasing her approval or begging to be seen. I let her words hang in the air and drift away like smoke. She called me selfish, but really I had just stopped offering myself up to be burned. I found an old notebook in the bottom drawer of my desk, the kind with the thick paper and the spiral spine, half used from years ago. I tore out the pages with grocery lists and phone numbers I didn't recognize anymore, and I started fresh. The first letter began with "Dear Rachel," just like all the others would. But this one was the hardest to write. I didn't plan it. I didn't sit down to craft a message or make a point. I just started, and the words came pouring out, like they'd been waiting in the corners of my chest for years. I told her about the day she was born, how I held her for the first time and panicked because I thought I'd drop her. I wrote about the time we built a birdhouse and she painted every inch of it bright purple, because, she said, birds like happy colors. I told her how much I missed her laugh, not the one she gives Michael or his mother, the real one, the one that came out in bursts when she used to watch cartoons with me on Sunday mornings, still in her pajamas. Then came the apologies. "I'm sorry I wasn't better at letting go. I'm sorry I filled silences with advice when you just needed quiet. I'm sorry I tried to love you like you were still 5 years old." And then the anger crept in. How could you forget the man who stayed up with you during your worst nightmares? How could you say I made everything about me when everything I had was you? I wrote dozens of pages, not all in one sitting, some at night when the house was still, some in the early mornings with a cup of cold coffee at my side. I didn't reread them. I didn't edit. I just kept writing, not to win her back, not to guilt her, but to release her, to release me. Because somewhere in the space between love and grief, I had become a man mourning someone still walking around in the world. And that kind of sorrow, it doesn't show up at funerals. It sits at kitchen tables and empty driveways. It lingers in birthday reminders you forget to delete. I filled 3 notebooks in total, stacked them on a shelf in the back of my closet. No labels, no titles, just a quiet stack of everything I never said, but always felt. I never planned to send them. But somehow, they still brought me home to myself. Word travels in strange ways. I hadn't spoken to Rachel in months, not since the call she hung up on me. But one morning, my sister Margaret called. She hesitated, like she wasn't sure whether to share what she knew. But eventually, it spilled out. Michael lost his job. Back in February, I think. Something about company restructuring. I didn't say much, just listened. "They've put the condo on the market," she continued. "Rachel called me last week. She didn't ask about you, but she asked if I could loan her some money." That part stung more than I expected. She didn't reach out to me. Even now, when the walls were cracking and the floor beneath her life was starting to give, she went around me. Called my sister, a woman she barely knew growing up. That silence? It said everything. I asked Margaret what she told her. I said no. I told her I didn't think it was my place to step in, especially with everything between you two. She got quiet after that. I thanked her for telling me, hung up, then sat on the porch and stared out at the road for a long time. Part of me, some old fatherly instinct, wanted to get in the truck, drive over, and fix it all. Wanted to hand her the check, sit her down, tell her it would be okay, that I still had her back. But I didn't move, because deep down, I knew this wasn't about money. This was about something she never gave me: trust. She had replaced me when it suited her, shut the door when things were good. Now the roof was leaking, and she was looking for a patch, but she wasn't looking for me, and so I stayed still. I made no calls, sent no messages, offered no comfort. I wasn't being cruel. I was being absent, just as she'd asked. I wish I could say it brought me satisfaction, that I felt vindicated somehow. But the truth is, watching her life falter from a distance wasn't a triumph. It was a quiet ache, a dull echo of all the times I could have held her, but wasn't allowed. She once said I made everything about me. Funny thing is, now that I wasn't there at all, her world seemed to fall apart anyway. I didn't gloat. I just went inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and watched the rain start to fall again. It came on a Tuesday. No return address, just a thick padded envelope left inside my mailbox, slightly bent at the corners. I thought it might be something from an old friend, maybe a gift catalog or a late holiday card. But when I opened it, I saw the leather binding first. Cream-colored. Embossed initials on the corner, R and M, Rachel and Michael. The wedding album. No note, no card, no explanation. I carried it to the kitchen table and sat down, heart doing that slow, heavy thud it always did when something important was about to happen. I ran my fingers along the spine for a moment before opening it. The first photo was of her bouquet, soft blush roses, delicate white lilies, tied with a ribbon that looked familiar. Page after page, it unfolded like a storybook I hadn't been invited to read. Rachel standing in a field of golden grass, wind playing with her veil. Michael smiling at her like she was the sun. Her laughing with bridesmaids I didn't know. Dancing under strings of fairy lights, her arms around her new family. Not one picture of me. Not even an empty chair. I kept turning pages, slower now. I think some part of me still hoped. Maybe there'd be a picture from childhood tucked in the back, a nod to the man who raised her. But there was nothing. I was invisible, erased so cleanly it almost looked intentional. That was the message. She didn't need words. The silence between those pages said more than any letter ever could. She was telling me, this was my life, and you weren't part of it. I closed the album slowly, pressing down the cover like sealing a memory shut. My hands rested on top of it for a long moment, still and firm. Then I slid it into the bottom drawer of the old sideboard, next to the letters I never sent, the macaroni card she made when she was 7, and the scarf I bought her 2 winters ago. I didn't slam the drawer, didn't curse, didn't cry. Instead, I walked to the living room, struck a match, and lit a small candle on the mantel. Not for her wedding, but for the letting go. Letting go of the version of her I'd been clinging to. Letting go of the ache that came from not being chosen. Letting go of the need to be in every chapter. Some stories move on without you, and the kindest thing you can do, for them, and for yourself, is not chase the ending. I sat in the soft flicker of the candlelight, hands folded in my lap, and let the quiet finally mean peace. It was a quiet Sunday, the kind where the world moves slower. The sun hung low, lazy behind the clouds, and I was halfway through a crossword puzzle when I heard the knock. Not the mailman, not Margaret. No one ever came by unannounced. I opened the door, and there she was, Rachel, hair pulled back, No makeup, dressed like she hadn't planned on seeing anyone. Her eyes met mine, but they didn't shine like they used to. They looked worn, heavy. "Hi," she said, voice thin. I blinked. "Rachel." She glanced down at her shoes, then back up at me. "I didn't call." "No," I said, stepping aside. "But you're here." She hesitated for a second before walking in, like the house was unfamiliar now, like she wasn't sure she still had permission to enter. Her eyes darted around. Nothing had changed. Same old armchair, same photo of her and her mother on the mantel, same worn carpet she used to sprawl out on as a kid. She began, then stopped, rubbed her hands together. "I was driving and ended up here." I nodded. "You want some tea?" She gave a weak smile. "Yeah, that'd be nice." In the kitchen, I set the kettle on the stove. Neither of us said much. She stood behind me, quiet, arms crossed like she was holding something in. When we sat at the table, she stared into her cup for a long time. Then finally, her voice broke the stillness. "Michael moved out." I said nothing, not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to fill the space she was finally choosing to open. She took a sip. "I don't know why I came here. I just didn't know where else to go." I nodded again, slow and steady. "I'm glad you did." She looked up, eyes glassy, lip trembling. "I know I've said some awful things. I know I hurt you." I didn't rush to answer. I didn't tell her it was okay, because it wasn't. But I also didn't turn her away. She reached out then, just her fingers across the table, barely touching mine. It wasn't an apology, not fully, but it was something. And for the first time in a long while, she was the one reaching for me. I poured her another cup of tea without asking, just like I used to when she was younger and didn't know how to say she wanted more. She sat across from me, both hands wrapped around the mug like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Her voice came in waves, memories, regrets, excuses, pauses. She talked about how Michael changed after the wedding, how she felt isolated, how things got hard fast. She spoke like someone confessing, not to seek forgiveness, but to make the silence a little less unbearable. I listened. That's all I did. I didn't nod. I didn't reassure. I just let her speak. Because this time, I wasn't going to fix it for her. Not because I didn't care, but because I finally understood the difference between caring and carrying. She tried to laugh once, weakly. "You always made the best tea," she said, staring into the steam. "Even when I didn't deserve it." I said nothing, just reached for the pot and topped off her cup again. That silence between us, it wasn't angry, it wasn't cold, it was honest, and in many ways it said more than words ever could. She looked at me, eyes searching, maybe hoping to see the man she remembered. The one who used to light up when she walked in the room. The one who'd have taken her in with open arms and forgotten every cruel thing she'd ever said. But I wasn't that man anymore. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't vengeful. I was just settled. Still. She tried again, softer this time. "Do you hate me?" I stirred my tea slowly. "No." She waited, expecting more. A but. A because. Something to soften the blow. But I let the quiet answer for me. She didn't cry. She just sat there and let the weight of everything she'd buried rise up between us. "I don't know what I'm supposed to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," I replied calmly. "You're here. That's enough for today." She nodded, wiped her thumb against the rim of her cup, and stared out the window. The sky was starting to dim. I didn't ask her to stay. I didn't ask when I'd see her next. And when she stood to leave, I didn't follow her to the door. She came for forgiveness. But I gave her tea. Because that's all I had left to give. The lawyer asked if I was sure. "Only the letter?" he said, eyebrows raised. Yes, I replied. Just the letter. Everything else, the house, the savings, the land, was going elsewhere now, to causes that still remembered how to say thank you, to people who saw me. But for Rachel, I left one envelope, placed carefully at the very end of the will. No assets, no strings, just a truth I needed her to hold, whether she read it with tears or indifference. Inside, it said, "You once said I was too much, but that's the only way I ever knew how to love." That was it. I didn't need to defend myself. Didn't need to explain the sleepless nights, or the meals left at her door, or the years spent building a life I thought we'd always share. She called it smothering. I called it fatherhood. She called it drama. I called it care. In the end, I didn't need her approval to make peace with who I was. Love doesn't have to be repaid to matter, but it shouldn't be punished either. That line, just 16 words, was my goodbye. Not angry, not desperate, just clear. She could ignore it, rip it up, laugh at it, or maybe years from now she'd read it again and finally understand. I didn't love her wrong. I just loved her with everything I had. And if that made me too much, then I'm glad I never learned how to be less.